Let's give a hand of applause for Gavin McGarrigle.
Thank you, Jesse. I asked for the short version to be read out, and apparently that wasn't it. So sorry you had to go through that. I'm Gavin. Welcome everyone to Whistler. Welcome to our BC Council. We're ready to go. I'm sure many of you know this already, but Whistler is a union town. It's actually a Unifor town. Many of the hotels here are represented by Unifor Local 3000, and we also have the transit workers who are represented by Local 114, my home local. And our Unifor hospitality locals have been absolutely on fire lately. We'll be having a rally tomorrow to support Whistler hotel workers, and I hope you'll join us for that. And we have several special guests from Unifor's National Executive Board and members of the senior staff team here that I want to quickly introduce. Of course, our Unifor National Secretary Treasurer, my friend Len Poirier, is here somewhere in the room. There he is right there. And the person who had to travel the farthest, and it's certainly appreciated, my good friend Jennifer Murray is here. The Atlantic Director, all the way from the East Coast. Welcome, Jennifer. Sammy Ahashi, our amazing Ontario Regional Director, is here also, just in the front. Thanks for coming. And we also have support here from Quebec, with the Quebec Director, Daniel Cloutier, here in person, along with his assistants, Olivier and Miriam Germain. And, of course, our National President, Lana Payne, is here with us in person right there, and you'll hear a lot more from Lana later today. I believe Michelle Wilson from Local 111, the Indigenous representative on our National Executive Board, is here too. Alain Daig, representing Road Transport, is here. Dirk Tolman, representing Energy. Les McDonald, representing retired workers on the Unifor National Executive Board. And of course, Guy DeForge, the Prairie Regional Chair, is here. So there's also a lot of senior staff that have come out. We have Executive Assistant to Lana Payne, Roxanne Dubois is here, and the Executive Assistant to National Secretary Treasurer Len Poirier, Sari Saarinen is over there, I think, yeah. And I believe we also have national assistants to the national officers, Tim Mitchell, Dan Valente, Shane Work, and senior directors Nikki Lundquist, John Aman, and Katha Fortier are here. The Western region keeps us very busy across 4 provinces, and I simply couldn't do it without Leanne Marsh and Guy DeForge, our 2 chairs in the West, and Steve Kerrigan, the Area Director for Alberta, Frank Wright, the Area Director for Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and of course, Mario Santos, our incredibly hardworking Area Director for BC, and also the Mining Director. And I have to give great thanks to my assistant, Terry Rowland, and the incredible team of support staff that are helping here. There's way too many to mention, and we'll be here all day. But you will see in your kits an amazing report on the work done by our departments, many of the directors who are also here today, and service staff, and they deserve our thanks too. So as I usually say, I get the privilege and honor to report out to you, but as always with our union, it's nothing but a team effort. Please give them all a warm round of applause to show your appreciation. So, what are we going to expect in this BC Council? Well, today we'll hear from our Premier, David Eby, our National President, Lana Payne, and our National Secretary Treasurer, Len Poirier. On November 18th, I was honored to attend the swearing-in ceremony of David Eby and his cabinet in Victoria at Government House on behalf of Unifor members. One of the things that David did during that ceremony stuck with me. There was a point when he spoke after announcing the new cabinet, when he asked the ministers on the stage to all stand and thank us from the stage to the hundreds of representatives in the room who all came together to make a better BC. David and his cabinet stood and clapped from the stage, and they recognized that their victory was our victory. And David agreeing to attend here and speak to us directly in person in Whistler while overseeing a busy transition in government speaks to all of your hard work. It recognizes and appreciates everything you've done in the election and, of course, the hard work we still have to do to make our province a better place. Unifor has been very, very busy all over the country and here in BC with bargaining and strikes and organizing and lobbying government and fighting elections, so settle in and I'll tell you a little bit about what we've been up to. With all of the bad news going on these days, it's important to remember that workers are fighting back harder than ever. We've had almost 100 strikes across Unifor since 2022, with tens of thousands of members going on strike for a better life. We might even actually be at 100 today. We're pretty close. PW Transit. Here we had our over Christmas workers on strike. That was transit workers in Local 114 at PW Transit, a contracted out group in Campbell River, Courtenay area, and they were on strike for 4 weeks over Christmas holidays last year. Also in the West, we just won a 44-day strike in Winnipeg earlier this year with Unifor Local 144 members at Amstad Rail, or Griffin Wheels as it's known. This strike was once again about forced overtime, and our members made major gains. And here in BC, 500 plus members in Unifor Local 3018 went on strike this summer against Taseko at the Gibraltar mine north of Williams Lake. It was a historic and effective short strike, led to an incredible victory in an industry that doesn't often see short strikes. And of course, speaking of strikes, we of course stand in solidarity with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers and the 55,000 members who are on strike at Canada Post. Workers are having a moment right now and fighting back, and we encourage all local unions to get out there, support those picket lines across the country during this dispute. Because, you know, employers don't like strikes, do they? Unions are now experiencing a coordinated attack by employers in the country to undermine the right to strike, and Unifor is committed to defending free and fair collective bargaining. We also recently saw the federal labour minister intervene in free collective bargaining and order binding arbitration to abruptly end a lockout at ports here in British Columbia and in Quebec. It's even more outrageous because it was the employer's decision to lock out those workers. We stand in solidarity with the port workers and the rail workers, and they had the same thing happen to them at the Teamsters this year under the now notorious Section 107 of the Canada Labour Code. Unifor members are going to face a coordinated attack by those same CEOs to circumvent collective bargaining, and they want heavy-handed government interventions. This cannot stand. In Canada, workers have the right to strike and to negotiate a fair collective agreement at the bargaining table. We're going to continue to defend that right, and that right must include the right to strike. But there's some good news to celebrate. As you heard, starting June 2025, federally regulated employers, including transportation, banks, telecom companies, will be restricted from using scabs during strikes or lockouts. Those who violate the new law will face fines of up to $100,000 a day. This once-in-a-generation update to the anti-scab laws didn't happen by chance. It was many people, but of course our union leading the charge, our members and activists leading the charge, and we made winning federal anti-scab legislation a reality. Many of you will remember last year's BC Council. We had a nice little march in downtown Vancouver calling for federal anti-scab legislation, and now it's on the books and will be in effect next year. And our efforts have also paid off getting a new government in Manitoba. Unifor members worked so hard there last year to bring in an NDP government there under Wab Kinew. I'm very happy to report, as you heard in the bio, that we just had provincial anti-scab legislation passed by the legislature in Manitoba a few weeks ago also, and we also managed to push for improvements to Manitoba labour law, and a new law was passed in Manitoba bringing back card check certification there as well. We are making a real difference for workers' rights. And we also know that we could be facing imminent strike or lockout action on our rail front also. Unifor Council 4000 and Local 100 members working at CN Rail recently held strike votes in workplaces across Canada. The result was 96% or higher. Unifor Local 101R opened talks with Canadian Pacific Kansas City, CPKC, in October and now filed for conciliation, and we're taking a strike vote there at 17 different workplaces across Canada. You know, the dust hadn't even settled on the Trump election when the big CEOs were ramping up their efforts to take away our right to strike, but I know rail workers, and I know Unifor, and I know for sure that we will fight them all with every last bit of strength that we have. And on the logistics front, I joined with Unifor bargaining reps from many Unifor locals who collectively represent 2,400 members at DHL across the country at a pre-bargaining strategy session this summer. Senior ITF representatives also attended, and DHL bargaining kicked off in early October, and it's sure to ramp up in the new year. Rates have been slashed across the country, and our members are fighting mad, and we'll have their back if they don't get a fair agreement this upcoming year. And we also know, of course, that our members in the media sector see difficult times, but I do have a good news story. You'll hear more about it, but the Vancouver Sun and Province closed their offices on August 31st this year. Now everyone works from home. Post Media was prepared to throw out over 100 years of photographs, a history of British Columbia through pictures. We managed to help save the history, and you'll hear more about that. As I said, I see Brian and Bill over there. And I was pleased to speak, by the way, congratulations to the Local 2000 Annual Congress a few weeks ago to celebrate their 140th birthday. They traced their roots back to 1884. Congratulations on that. Now, as we know, the global pandemic was extremely hard on our members working in the hospitality industry. As I always say, they were the first laid off and they were the last to come back. But now the industry has bounced back, and these workers know their worth, and they're demanding their fair share of the profits, and they're not afraid to go on strike to achieve it. We had an excellent round of bargaining with the Coast Cold Harbour in Vancouver this summer and achieved a historic 22 to 32% increase over 3 years, with reductions in housekeeping workload and many other gains. This victory from Local 3000 members only came after a strong strike vote with a high turnout and the housekeepers insisting on taking their 15-minute breaks, which sent a strong message to management that the housekeeping workload was excessive. I see Adrian over there. Congratulations, Adrian, to you and the whole team on that one. We reached, yes, you should. It's worth. We also reached a new agreement at the Hotel Grand Pacific in Victoria. Strong strike vote there by Local 114 members. We concluded bargaining with a 3-year deal, significant wage increases, increases to pension, vacation, reduction in housekeeping workload, better wages, better working conditions, better conditions for retirement. That's what hospitality workers are demanding, and they're getting it right now one way or another. And in Vancouver, we just wrapped up a successful strike of Local 433 members at the Residence Inn by Marriott. I see James up here. I was happy to join them on the line this August and later to march with them through the streets of Vancouver to the corporate headquarters of Silver Birch to send a strong message of defiance. We stopped in the lobby and sent a powerful message, and that strike was resolved and a new deal was ratified only a few days later. The determined members at the hotel returned to work with an excellent agreement that included a 12% increase in the first year and up to 26% by the end of the agreement. Congratulations, James and Greg and everyone on that agreement. And we're currently in collective bargaining with the Coast Blackcomb here in Whistler, who are members of Local 3000. This is the first of the Whistler hotels to start bargaining after the Victoria and Vancouver patterns have been set, and we're going to try and do the same up here. At Blackcomb Springs, all items have been agreed on except for wages, and their offer is far too low. They're relying on high turnover to try to get away cheap. And if any of you have ever checked what the hotel rates are up here, when you try to come up, you can see they got lots of money to be paying. So as I said, we'll have a big rally tomorrow. We're going to be loud. We're going to be leafleting all the hotels. And, you think these rallies don't mean anything, but last year we were out for anti-scab. Now we haven't. And I feel confident with Jen and Adrian and the whole 3000 crew and your support, we are going to get good agreements for the workers here in Whistler. And in transit, up in Quesnel, we just negotiated a first collective agreement with Quesnel Transit in July. It was ratified by 100%. We were able to secure paid bargaining, increases to annual vacation, sign-up language, and get this, wage increases of an amazing $2 an hour in each year of the collective agreement. Amazing work. Congratulations. And our energy workers have also been busy negotiating their pattern agreement and planning for the next round of bargaining is well underway. I just came from a conference in Edmonton a few weeks ago where they were working on updating their pattern bargaining strategies, and they're going to need that to take on these energy giants. You'll hear from the chair of the Energy Council, Dirk Tolman, later on in this council about the new Keep It in the Pipeline campaign, which is really exciting, going after fugitive emissions to make sure that we deal with climate change. You'll also hear a workshop there's on climate change. Sari Saarinen just got back from the COP conference in Azerbaijan. I'm sure she can give updates on that. And we're also waiting for the federal government to finalize the new Sustainable Jobs Partnership Council arising out of the new Bill C-50 that, of course, we help to push for as well. Now, organizing, something near and dear to my heart. As you've no doubt seen, our organizing department's on fire also. I don't even have time to cover them. But we just heard we welcome 40 new spa workers at the Willow Stream Spa in the Empress Hotel in Victoria. They organized into there's Maddie. Yeah, congratulations, Maddie. Unifor Local 4276. There's very few unionized hotels that have spa workers, and we have registered massage therapists now as well. And Maddie will be the first to tell you that card check certification was what helped you get across the line on that one. Congratulations, everyone at the Empress. At YVR, 170 members at SAMSIC were also successfully certified, and they're part of Local 2002. CTV. In October, we applied to certify a group of employees employed by Bell in front and behind the camera working on the televised CTV Vancouver news programs. That's also going through the board's review process, and we believe that we're going to get an automatic certification there as well. Now, Amazon. In May this year, we applied to the BC Labour Relations Board for certification of 2 large Amazon warehouses in Delta and New Westminster. The effort was significant, including assistance from many local unions here in the room and many member organizers who were supporting our staff organizers on the ground. Now, the Labour Board eventually ordered a vote at one warehouse, And we've got that vote sealed pending a hearing, and the hearing is going to start, I believe, in January or February. So we believe that Amazon committed serious unfair labor practices. We believe they inflated employee numbers. In every screen inside the building, there was anti-union messages. I think they met with almost everybody. They used everything in the book to try to defeat these workers. But we believe that we won that vote, whether we open it up and count it, but we also believe we've got a good case for an automatic certification. So stay tuned. In the next few months, we could see our very first certification for about 700 or 800 Amazon workers right here in British Columbia. Amazing. But why stop at Amazon? Because we've got to go after Walmart as well, right? So we just last week, or 2 weeks ago, announced we have now certified 95 Walmart truck drivers here in BC to follow up on our huge win organizing a massive Walmart distribution center in Ontario. We're also in the middle of a campaign at Walmart in Calgary as well, and I hear good things there also. So special recognition, of course, goes to our organizing team in BC, including our organizers Simon Lau and Margaret Olal for their dedication and hard work. Please reach out to them if you have any leads. And equally important has been the exceptional support from local unions and those members who have stepped up as member organizers. These member organizers played a pivotal role, working alongside staff to engage workers on the ground, share their own union experiences, speak sometimes in their own languages. And there's a recommendation in your kits on organizing and scaling up our efforts, so we're doing good, but I know we can do so much more. And this upcoming holiday season, we're active in the community as well. As you know, some of you might know this, Unifor Social Justice Fund will be making its annual donations to food banks and women's shelters across the country, and it's an honor for me to sit on that board, along with other leadership here, helping the great work. So in total, $300,000 will be donated to food banks and $175,000 donated to women's shelters in Canada just this year alone, not to mention the many other projects. It's badly needed. And the Unifor's BCRC Bywalk Committee hosted our annual Lunar New Year celebration earlier this year for a packed hall, lots of politicians, lots of people there. We had NDP leader Jagmeet Singh came in. And in the rest of the West, we held our first Unifor Stampede barbecue in Calgary this year. No, I don't have any extra cowboy hats, so don't ask. And I joined events by our Manitoba Rec Council for the Filipino Street Festival, and we just did the Santa Claus Parade not too long ago. And I joined with many Unifor members this summer at the Vancouver Pride Parade this year. Thank you, Danny, and everyone involved in the hard work doing not just that event, but doing events all over the province. It's really amazing to see the consistent turnout of Unifor members to these events, and it's important. On September 30th, I joined with many Unifor members at Queen's Park in New Westminster who came out to support the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This day is about honoring the experiences of former students and survivors in the residential school system and to promote awareness of the residential school system and the harm it had and continues to have on Indigenous communities. So thank you to all of you who came out to listen and learn more on that day, and especially those who spoke at the event and shared their powerful stories about the need for action. And just a few days later, I joined with many Unifor members at the same park a few days later for the Tears to Hope events across the country. This fundraiser helps. It's an Indigenous-led organization primarily focused on supporting the families and loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people, raising awareness and promoting prevention. So again, thank you to everyone who joined and planned, and thank you to our chair, Leanne, and Gina Smoke, our national our Director of Indigenous Relations. We had, again, an amazing turnout for that too. Thank you. We also had a celebration that was put on by our BC Regional Council Women's Committee for International Women's Day, and I was happy to come and bring some brief greetings there, but it was an amazing event that they all had. And, you know, with BC leading the country in the coverage for prescription contraception, there's a lot to celebrate. But sadly, there's much left to fight for, including action on the epidemic of intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence is a devastating epidemic affecting thousands of individuals, families, and communities across Canada. Demand for support services has risen, and unfortunately, victims are often left without the assistance they need due to the chronic underfunding of shelters, crisis services, and legal resources. Alarmingly, nearly half of Canadian women, 44%, report experiencing some form of IPV, with women disproportionately suffering the most severe forms of abuse. On a global scale, it's estimated that nearly 1 in 3 women in a relationship will face intimate partner violence at least once in their lifetime. I saw a small sample of what it's like and how great the need is. I visited a women's shelter in Hinton this year. That shelter is represented by Unifor members. I was there with Lana, and I could see the need. And actually, I could see how many people, I'm not going to get into the numbers, but it's amazing how many workers they had to have at that shelter in that one small town. And that is going on in every town and community across the country. So we're going to have some important presentations. I think there's a resolution coming forward. We have a group coming up, but there's never enough funds, and our help is always much needed. And anything we do, I know from seeing it, makes a difference. We've already signed on to a coalition that sent a letter to Premier Eby asking him to declare gender-based violence an epidemic in BC. And I'm so proud of my sister, Jennifer Murray, and all the sisters in the Atlantic region and across our union who pushed so hard to get this on the agenda. And I know that Tracy Ramsey and the Women's Committee will have much more to say about this and what we can do to help on Sunday. And we met with Premier Eby and Labour Minister Harry Bains this spring as part of our BC Regional Council lobbying. We once again raised the need to go further, and that the new Pay Transparency Act, it's a start, but what we really need is a Pay Equity Act that has real teeth. We already know that there's a gender-based pay gap, and that strong pay equity programs can and does result in real pay increases to workers in areas where they have it, even under a Conservative government in Ontario, and of course federally. And simply being more transparent about the gender pay gap doesn't put any real money in people's pockets. And that's what we need to change. We've taken it right to the top, and we're not going to let up until we see some pay equity legislation in this province as well. We've also been busy engaging with WorkSafe BC. We've made submissions in many areas. I can't even go through how many there's so many incredible submissions we've made. You'll hear more from our safety committee later on recent meetings. We met with the WorkSafe BC Board of Directors and our meetings with the CEO, and of course we challenged the status quo in many areas. You know, the new NDP platform pledges numerous changes, including more prevention of workplace accidents and injuries by increasing the inspection and enforcement capacity of WorkSafe BC. They've committed to extending presumptive workers' compensation for all workers who witness a traumatic workplace death. They've pledged to ban employers and other service providers from requiring a doctor's note for short absences due to illnesses. Because as we know all too well, doctor's notes are a waste of time and they cost workers money. So there's a recommendation in your kits, and I hope we'll all get behind the great work. I'm very proud of our health and safety team, our health and safety department. I see Joanne's here. Just incredible work that they've been doing, and it's making a real difference. In forestry, our forest sector continues to be dramatically affected by market cycles, issues with access to fiber, reckless exports, corporate concentration, and the sheer scale of equipment investment concerns. These concerns have now led to one bad news story after another, from Powell River to Crofton to Prince George. And our union is mobilizing to help, and we're working with many locals also for the upcoming pattern forestry bargaining next year. Local 603 in Prince George, I think Jonathan's here in the room, is still reeling after 3 waves of layoffs, a total of 95 members, and the future is uncertain. Last year, you'll remember that BC Regional Council delegates passed a resolution to support a sustainable forestry sector in BC. The resolution called on us to work with other stakeholders to address challenges due to the lack of fibre, to fight for a clear vision for a working forest, and to report to the locals and this year's council on our progress. Well, we got to work. Within a few months of that council, we came together with all the other Unifor forestry locals in BC, and we held a Forestry Workers Summit in March 2024, and we did it with the United Steelworkers and the PPWC, all the major unions on forestry in BC, together for the first time. We had union leaders, policymakers, researchers. We all came together. We had the Premier there, we had the Forest Minister there, and we forced them to pay attention. And we continued to work with the government. I toured various mills, went to Local 592 and 686 in Port Alberni. We went with Andrew Mercier, who was the Minister for Fibre Access. We were joined on that tour in Port Alberni by the Tayshat First Nations chief, and he asked Minister Mercier during our tour to get more access to the wildfire-damaged wood and other wood to fuel the industry, and they've now pledged to work with agreements with First Nations to reduce their costs on stumpage. We also lobbied successfully Kamloops City Council to adopt a union motion for support at forestry for the Union of BC Municipalities. The Fighting for Our Future Forestry Coalition was also present that week. We had a booth there. We had members of the forestry locals talking to all the mayors and councillors from all over the province about the urgent need for more action in forestry. Following that meeting, we met with a consortium of coastal First Nations to discuss deeper collaboration to bring stable jobs to an unpredictable boom and bust forestry industry. And we've continued to seek further collaboration with the BC First Nations Forestry Council, and I met with their CEO recently to discuss further opportunities next spring. And so in response to our campaign, and of course the unease in the industry at large, the re-elected BC NDP government has made new promises to forestry communities directly in their platform, and I need to mention them because they're important. Getting more jobs per tree by tying our working force resources to mills and companies that employ British Columbians, and by putting further restrictions on log exports. These are actual quotes from the platform now. Increasing fiber security for primary, secondary users and value-added manufacturers by working toward a harvest of 45 million cubic meters per year. Completing a full review of BC timber sales to improve the process for accessing public timber and to drive better outcomes for jobs in forestry-dependent communities. Working to fight U.S. softwood lumber tariffs and pushing Ottawa to take tough action now to support BC industry workers and communities to use every available avenue, resource, and tool to fight these unjustified and unfair tariffs. And reviewing the stumpage system in light of these tariffs and recent trade decisions from the U.S. in order to identify further reforms. So there's significant action pledged, but we need to make it a reality. There's a recommendation in your kits about forestry, and I hope that you'll support that. And I've already connected with the new incoming Forestry Minister, Ravi Parmar, and the Labour Minister, Jennifer Whiteside, will be up here to speak to us as well. Now, on transit, one of our other major industries here in British Columbia, the Lower Mainland Mayor's Council has been sounding the alarm about a lack of permanent capital and operating funds for continued action on maintaining and expanding transit in the Vancouver region. TransLink has also reached out to us, outlining their concern. We've heard scenarios about layoffs of thousands of bus operators. The Mayor's Council Chair, Brad West, has said recently that funding needs to be in place by April 2025 to, quote, avoid a doomsday scenario of significant cuts and reductions to cuts in service across the region. He is saying that this could mean shutting down all bus service after 8 p.m., cutting most bus service in some of the fastest growing communities, and reducing SkyTrain service by 30%. The fact that we are even talking about cuts instead of protecting and funding what we have and expanding the system, it's just disgraceful. We need real action and commitments to work out the necessary funding for public transit in a way that works for workers and their families and everyone who depends on a robust and growing public transit system. We don't have any time for games at any level between different levels of government. We need to protect and expand transit. And again, the NDP platform has some interesting things in there as well. It talks about expanding and strengthening transit service by working with TransLink and the Mayor's Council on the Access for Everyone plan to ensure service continues to be there for people. This isn't a joke, because we've seen this happen before. Our folks in Local 111, the beginning of the pandemic, because of fighting between different levels of government, 1,300 bus operators received pink slips, received layoff notices. They were in the mail. And it was only when we fought back and raised public outrage, we got every single one of those layoff notices ripped up before anyone lost even 1 hour. So I'm very worried about where this is going to go. We're going to have to ramp up our efforts in the new year there as well. And you heard me, yes, thank you. You heard me also talk about the strikes that we've had here in Whistler, and we had them up in PW Transit. And the problem is we have continued private delivery of public transit. This is contentious. You know, why have we seen a wave of strikes? It's pretty simple. Because before 2017, all these contracted out places were vulnerable to contract flipping. So the workers knew that if they went on strike, if they stood up for themselves, they could lose everything, their vacation, everything. Well, guess what Unifor did? We brought the NDP in 2017. We pushed for contract flipping. We got it in building cleaning, security, and transit. And so, of course, once the transit workers knew that they had the ability to fight back, they started fighting back hard. The strike that we had here at Whistler Transit was, I think, almost the longest transit strike in British Columbia history. We had many rallies here. We were fighting hard. We got the mayor and got him in the middle of a rally and stuck a megaphone in his mouth, and he was good. He was there, and he's going to come speak to us. That's the problem. You can't have these private contractors skimming off the money that should be going back to the workers, be going back into the investment of the system. So we've been nonstop on this. We've met with the Premier, we've met with the Labour ministers, we've been lobbying on this for years. Those of you who've been with us will know that we've been doing that. So now what do we have? In the BC NDP platform, they've now finally promised to, quote, review all private delivery models within BC Transit to make sure British Columbians are getting the best value for tax dollars and the best service for their needs. So we're going to get a review. It's urgent, and we're going to face further job action in transit in the next few months if we don't get something done. But it's simply unfair that transit workers should be underpaid so some private corporation can skim off the money. And you know, when these transit strikes occur, what do we see? Everyone blaming everyone else. It's not the mayor's fault. It's not BC Transit's fault. Certainly not the province's fault. Well, who the hell's fault is it? And so we're going to participate in this private transit delivery review model, and we're going to demand answers on government about how we can switch all these private workers into a public system where we can get them better pensions and better working conditions and also build better transit for our communities. So again, the recommendation in your kits, please support that, and I'd love to hear from some of you later on that as well. Now this spring, we also had more than 50 Unifor members across the province, meetings with MLAs, lobbying them on a whole bunch of things. We've been pushing for improvements to standards for so-called gig workers, those who work for giants like Uber and Skip the Dishes. And BC actually did recently introduce some new minimum standards in a law that we were consulted on. These new minimum standards include minimum hourly wages, stronger tip protections, compensation for vehicle expenses, and gig workers will be covered by workers' compensation for job-related industry. It's a start. But there are still serious obstacles when gig workers attempt to form unions, such as the total lack of transparency about just how big any gig company's workforce is. How can you organize a workplace if you have no clue how many people work there? It's hard enough when we have to figure it out in actual physical locations, but when it's on an app, you simply don't know. So in fact, they have no right to organize, and that's what we're pushing for. We've already been lobbying to get back to a system where if we can get at least 20% support, they have to disclose the full list. There's lots more things that we can push this government to do on organizing. And, of course, where do we celebrate our victories? Labor Day. Terrific this year. Labor Day, the BC Council put it on. We had dozens of volunteers. We had almost 1,500 Unifor members and their family come through on Labor Day. We had the Premier come to visit. There must have been an election just around the corner maybe. But it was great to see. And, you know, we had a lot of positive feedback. I'm sure the locals will tell you. Just members coming up just so pleased to wear a Unifor shirt on Labor Day, go to the PNE, really come together. And every year the demand is off the roof. In fact, the demand is so high, we're going to have to figure out kind of the best way to do it to make sure it's there. But it's great to see so many members proud to come out with Unifor. Now, of course, last year I talked about the resolutions we passed. We passed a resolution to fight to keep the worker-friendly government we have, and that begins with planning, educating, and mobilizing our membership for the election. We launched a massive member-to-member campaign in this election. We registered as a third-party advertiser. We sponsored bus ads and radio ads with our message of not going backwards after all of our gains these past few years. We had dozens of activists on the ground from many different locals about the critical importance of voting and volunteering. And in the end, we helped to defeat a Conservative wave. We retained a majority NDP government that should last until 2028. But the road ahead has many challenges. As I said, our forestry workers are facing a difficult environment. Many sectors are hit and are going to be hit by the impact of erratic trade and investment policies, and people are just tired of piecemeal change. They want real change. So leading into the election, the BC Liberals, as you know, were the main right-wing party here for years. Then they rebranded themselves as BC United, which I knew sounded like a failed soccer team. Bad news from the start. Sure enough, they dropped in the polls. Utter failure. And the BC business community finally gave BC United leader Kevin Falcon an ultimatum. Merge with the BC Conservatives or lose all your funding. And he did. He ditched all his candidates to the BC Conservatives, stood down himself, and united the right wing in the most brutal way possible by stabbing his party and all its candidates in the heart on an eve of an election with no consultation. We knew then that we faced a real hard right-wing Conservative wave, and this would be more like the election in 2017 where Surrey was going to become the battleground. But I'm very proud to say that we succeeded as a team in a union. We had one of the largest and most diverse team of member organizers ever on the ground for 4 weeks. More than 51 local members were out, also speaking Punjabi, Hindi, Cantonese, Spanish, many different Unifor members meeting each other for the first time and working together. We also had a member from Local 111 running, and we supported him where we could. The result? 47 seats, another majority. This is the only time in British Columbia history where we have seen 3 successive NDP governments in a row. Yes. So this is a win, and it's a win that you all helped get us. It matters who we elect, and you all know that in the room. Hundreds of volunteer hours. And so we need to meet this new government. We need to meet the new MLAs and cabinet ministers in person as soon as possible and reintroduce them to Unifor, remind them of our priorities, and ensure that they get those NDP platform commitments to benefit workers enacted as quickly as possible. So we need to go, there's a recommendation in your kits, we need to go out and meet, not only in our BC lobbies, but in your community. Take them out for lunch, go visit their office, get to know them. Say, do you know our local? Do you know what we're all about? That's how we're going to make the change. So I want to thank the Political Action Committee, and especially Rob Sangara from Local 111, the chair of the Political Action Committee. You'll hear more from him later, and the MMPA department, Josh Coles, Aaron Harrison. It truly made a difference, and we held on to our government. So one more round of applause for winning that election. Amazing. Now, unfortunately, I was quite sad to hear about the passing of former BC Premier John Horgan a few weeks ago. I knew John personally. I worked on John's first campaign in Langford, and we had many important and sometimes fiery discussions about working people and unions over the years, but I always knew that he cared very deeply for people and truly wanted to make things better. In November 2022, I had the honor to be a guest and speaker on behalf of our union at an event in Ottawa, recognizing John Horgan in all his many ways. That was the last time I saw him. He'll be remembered by Unifor members across the country as a champion for working people. His legacy is that we have some of the healthiest public services and the strongest workers' rights in Canada. So we mourn his significant loss, extend our heartfelt condolences to his family, friends, and all of you who had the honor of working with him. We'll miss you, John. You were one of the great ones. And as you might know, we just finished fighting another provincial election in the West, an election in Saskatchewan. The best results the NDP has seen in 17 years. Moving from 14 seats to 27 seats, and we came within 4 seats and about 1,700 votes from toppling the Saskatchewan party. 5 prominent cabinet ministers lost their seats. It was not a good night for Scott Moe. And in Saskatchewan, we had 34 member organizers on the ground in Regina, Saskatoon, and Moose Jaw. I was on the ground in Saskatoon at the start of the campaign. I joined the Regina crew near the end. We had 3 Unifor members that were running, and one of them was elected, Jordan McPhail from Unifor Local 2S. We also had someone from the Prairie Regional Council Workers with Disability Committee run for office from 2S, Brenda Adele, and we also had someone, a Unifor member, running directly against Scott Moe, Mark Thunderchild from Local 649. So not only were our people on the ground helping, they were running in office, and we gave Scott Moe his worst night in 17 years, and he bloody well deserves it. So don't like that guy at all. Now, I know that Unifor members across the country have closely followed the U.S. election, and certainly the recent announcement, or tweet, whatever it was, a few days ago about 25% tariffs. This has caught everyone's attention, and this will have devastating consequences. We already know that Trump's first term saw these unilateral and unprovoked trade threats and tariffs on our Canadian goods, including automotive, aerospace, steel, aluminum, forestry industries, among others. Unifor's National Executive Board has put out a statement on this election that fully commits us to meet head-on all challenges resulting from the policies of a second Trump administration. We're going to vigorously defend the rights of all workers in Canada. We're going to work with like-minded governments, civil society organizations, and U.S.-based allies wherever and whenever we can. We can and must build working-class power across borders, and throughout history, we're going to have to reactivate those ties of solidarity with our brothers, sisters, and siblings in the States as well. This is going to be a challenge, and I know Lana will have a lot more to say about this. And we're facing a federal election next year, and depending on how things go, it could get even worse for us here. But you know what? Whatever happens, whatever we have to deal with, the mission is the same, isn't it? Defend working people. Fight for economic and social justice with good, decent jobs and good pensions and benefits. And in all this incredible work I've just described, I take strength from our members. I take strength from all of you. And from our incredible national elected leadership team, Lana, Len, Daniel, Jennifer, and Samia. They're a great team to work with, and of course, all of our incredible national staff. And so as much as there are dark clouds in Canada and elsewhere, a renewed sense of militancy is also cropping up among workers in the face of low wages and high inflation. It's inspiring others to demand better from their employers and to hit picket lines if necessary, as tens of thousands of Unifor members have done in the past 2 years, and we have stood with them every step of the way. Corporations and right-wing governments will continue to try to gouge us. They'll continue to try to push us back and destroy our movement, because we all know that corporations and governments don't like strong unions. They don't like workers who know their strength. They don't like that we're one of the only organized forces in society. We're an organized force who can reach into their back pocket and take money out. Most nonprofits don't have that kind of power, but we do. We can force them to lower their profits, increase our wages, reduce their reliance on overpaid contractors, and dramatically impact production as well if necessary. If we can organize ourselves even more, we can throw them out of office as well and help new governments become elected and accountable to the working class instead of the billionaire class for a change. So I'm proud and honored to stand with you and our amazing team of leaders, locals, and staff every day. Thank you very, very much for everything you've done, everything you will do going forward, and we'll do it all together in solidarity. Thank you, everyone.